There is a weird over-indexing, almost cult-like thing around the nature of busyness. Call it OKRs, you can call it whatever you want. Outcomes. Why am I doing the work I'm doing? And what meaning does it have to me personally? What meaning does it have to the company? And what meaning does it have to the customer?
This week on Association Chat, we are exploring the future of association impact with Juan Sanchez, CIO of Inteleos.
A KPI is a health metric. It's either in a good standing or a good space, or it's in a bad space. An OKR is a metric you use to measure change.
Juan is transforming how organizations, including associations, friends, innovate and thrive while embracing the future of credentialing and organizational design.
And it's really not about the dogma about how to write the OKR. It's sort of the essence of understanding the outcomes that matter to the thing you're trying to get to.
Leveraging AI, blockchain, and agile methodologies, Juan sets us up with a powerful blueprint for keeping your association relevant and scaling its impact. I want to start at the very beginning, and I want to talk about what sparked your interest in digital transformation and purpose-driven tech for nonprofits. So explain to us how you got to be here with us today.
I mean, look, the origin story kind of begins. I showed up at Inteleos in 2019, late summer of 2019. Our CEO, Dale, who's always a learning guy, has 3 books on the desk for me with a handwritten note, which I still have. So pro tip to everybody out there, write handwritten notes because they mean something to people. One of those books was around OKRs. It was a famous book, Measure What Matters. And the other book was Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And I've talked about those before. There was a third one, which was The End of Competitive Advantage. Don't tell anybody. I still haven't read that book because I'm still into the other two. That I just
imagine where you would be if you had. Oh my gosh.
I know, right? And so that was really the beginning of that transformation for myself, which was to understand strategy, understand what outcomes were, and OKRs were the methodology we were beginning to use at that time at Inteleos. And it's just, honestly, it's it's weird, but it's literally the only thing I can think about these days is I just constantly think about strategy and how to tie that together with outcomes.
Yeah, I've really noticed that. I mean, if any word could be, I think, connected to you based on what you write about the most that I've seen, okay, it would be outcomes. You definitely focus on that. And I have heard you mention Marty Kagan before in some of your interviews and talking about that. And Marty Kagan, for those who are watching, I had to look this up because I'm not as deep into all of this, right? But product management expert and author, he says the key to great product management is to focus on the right things. You need to prioritize the things that are most important to the customer and focus on solving the right problems. And I really see you focusing on that a lot. And recently you wrote in your Substack, which for everyone, I'm going to post this at the bottom. The Sopho Sapien Substack, right? The Sopho Sapien. Sopho Sapien, yes, from the Greek. Yeah, got it. Okay, I'm catching up. The Sopho Sapiens alphabet is what this is called. And it really stuck with me. In the age of AI agents, if you can't specify the outcome, you can't win. So that hits really hard for associations that are juggling a lot of different initiatives all at once and who maybe were not so great at identifying that to begin with. So talk to us a little bit about that magic around OKRs and why you're so focused on using them to focus on the outcomes so that people understand out there, how this can maybe help them get closer to success.
Yeah. All right, cool. So look, the first disclaimer I want to just get out to everybody is this transition in thinking is incredibly hard. Okay. So it is not something that you, weirdly, when I first was introduced to this, I was like, oh, I got this. I read a book, right? So it's like staying at the Holiday Inn. I read a book and now I can do it. And you can, in theory, you can get up on a whiteboard or on your computer screen and type out something that looks like an OKR. And it's really not about the dogma about how to write the OKR. It's sort of the essence of understanding the outcomes that matter to the thing you're trying to get to, and like getting into the essence of this. And it sounds a little hippy dippy, but it's hard. I mean, it really is. To get to the core and the heart of the problem that you're trying to solve in the company, or the change that you're trying to affect, is harder than it seems. So I just want to say that, because I don't want people to come out here and to try doing this and say, oh, all right, this is a goal setting thing, and we could just write goals like this, and this is fine. It's harder, but it's so worth the payback, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And we've been doing it for 5 years. We're in the middle right now of like trying to really assess, is this really landing with everybody at the company, or is it just some of us that are kind of getting it? And is it our own fever dream, right? So we got to calibrate that too, because executives will be executives, and that'll happen. Right. Yeah. So it's a hard thing to do, but it's super meaningful and super important. And, the connection with Marty, I had the honor of going to one of his master classes up in New York. I think it was last year. And for me, what it gets down to the clarity of thought. Right. So Marty really has distilled down, and I mean, a lot of this stuff is connected. We can kind of explore some of those pockets later on, but Marty is about product. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so once you start thinking about product, you start thinking about, okay, why do I put a product into a market? Right. And, he basically says it's like, it has to solve a problem. And that problem can't be one that you believe exists. It has to be one that the customer tells you exists. Right. And they may tell you that explicitly. Pro tip, not a focus group. Because they'll tell you what you want to hear in a focus group, right? Yeah. So they may tell you explicitly, or they might imply it to you by way of what they think the problem is, right? And so your job is to kind of infer something. Now, how do you translate that into a company, right? How do we make teams in a company say, okay, I empathize and I understand with this problem space. And now, how am I going to measure that I am effectively solving that problem? And solving the problem isn't launching a product, right? Mm-hmm. It's what are the measurements in there? Go to the outcomes, right? What are the measurements in there that tell you that through proof, right? Outcomes that's happening. And so in order for that to be true, there's things that you have to build in, right? You have to have what we call telemetry, right? Which is any way of getting information back from the person that's engaging with your product, whatever that might be. It doesn't have to be, technology based. And then tracking that on a consistent basis so that you as a team know that you're making progress or that you're not making progress, right? Then that's a flywheel, because that informs what other initiatives are we going to try, right? So initiatives being more like the word I hate, which is projects, but mm-hmm. initiatives, things, what are we going to try to keep that needle moving and changing in the right direction? And I think, to put a little bit of bow on it for now, for this little segment, the next sort of ladder up there, which is the part that I'm really exploring right now, is strategy, right? And really getting deep into what is strategy, what does it mean, what isn't strategy, right? Like Roger Martin, which is a guy I love, another strategy guy out there. He's got this famous little, I think it's like a 6 or 8 minute video that says strategy is not a plan, right? And so I've gotten into the whole breaking out into hives when I hear strategic planning as a term. So that's sort of the place where I feel now in sort of an executive role that I'm in, which is really where I need to learn, because I haven't been taught. I didn't get taught this anywhere along the way, really. And now trying to help the teams kind of connect all of these concepts together: product, outcome thinking, and strategy in one kind of cohesive picture for everybody.
Why do you think it's so unusual for association leaders to think about or talk about their planning and the way that they look at their organizations and what they're trying to achieve, using the terms, using this type of focus on outcomes and thinking about it this way? It's and I will say that you want, I looked at this and I thought, okay, if I'm going to form some OKRs around association chat, what is that going to look like? And sure, you can plug in your it's like measurable goals. It's like the SMART goals, No, because you're talking about really dialing in and being super honest and probably getting to a lot more questions than answers. So
that's right.
I'll go back to what I started out with, though, which is why aren't more people talking like this or thinking like this?
Well, so the good news, so yeah, in the association space, you know, I don't know for sure, right? Like, so let's just touch on the origin of OKRs, right? They come out of the mid 70s out of Intel, right? And there's a guy named Andy Grove who's kind of like known as the originator of this stuff. He talks to another engineer at Intel, John Doerr, who is the guy who wrote the book I mentioned at the beginning. And then he goes to Larry and Sergey at Google and says, hey, you guys aren't doing well. Do you want to try this thing we tried over at Intel? And they said yes. And we kind of know what the rest of that story is, right? I'm not going to say that OKRs was what created Google, but it certainly didn't hurt, right? And then weirdly, a lot of other companies took it on as well. And we should be proud that here in the U.S. that there's been evil created through technology, no doubts. But as an industry and as a source of energy and innovation, you can't deny what happened in Silicon Valley between the 70s and the 2000s, right? I mean, it's either that or there's something in the water there.
Right.
So in those worlds, you know, I think there's a lot of confluence that happens there. You know, agile thinking was happening, OKRs were there. Does that erode some of the more traditional values and barriers around what it means to be a leader, it means to be an executive? Maybe, I don't know. I would look. So if I'm really pressed into a corner to try to answer the question is why does this not get used as much in associations? I think one is because we tend to be insular in terms of isolated from other industries. Right. We're either focused on the industries we represent, trades or professions, or in our case, as Inteleos being certifying doctors and sonographers. That's where we are. Right. And so unless you get cross-pollinated there, chances are it's going to be hard. So I think looking outwards to other industries, other sectors, I think is a good start. I think there's another part which is not unique to associations, but this is more of a leadership pathology, which is I can't be seen as not knowing the answer or seeing the future. Because if I do that, then what am I doing in the role? Right. And so that leads you straight to, well, I'm going to have a plan. We're going to have a plan because plans give you the illusion of certainty into the future. Right. And then as long as we do the plan, which, by the way, is an output, because we all got together in a room and we did the thing. And now we have a list of things that are going to maybe happen. And then 3 months from the day we did that thing, we don't even remember where we were when we did the meeting. Now things have changed, but it's okay. We did the plan. Now so this is a thing, right? And I think finally, at least in my experience, there is a weird over-indexing, almost cult-like thing around the nature of busyness, right? And so the more tasks I have on my list, the more value attaches to me in a really weird and perverse way as far as what my value is to a company. Well, look at all the things I have to get done today. Check, check, right? Okay, why am I doing any of that? Right? Why am I doing any of that? What are the outcomes of me getting that list in front of myself, or the boss puts it in front of me, or whatever it might be? That's where the outcome thinking, you can call it OKRs, you can call it whatever you want. Outcomes. Why am I doing the work I'm doing? And what meaning does it have to me personally? What meaning does it have to the company? And what meaning does it have to the customer?
Yeah. And you can't actually, I think that that's such a good point, because that's something that we can all practice in our daily lives too. Do you ever just stop and say, why am I doing this thing? Like, is this even still something that I care? Like, why am I don't know. Sometimes I look like, I look for solutions, or maybe I need to create some new thing. I put all this work into thinking I have to invent something new. And really it was just a matter of, well, why don't I just move this other thing that lives over here and reassign it in my life? This recently happened. And so, so I can see where this idea of questioning, like, why am I doing this, is really a good start. And it makes a lot of sense to do that in a lot of cases, especially for our associations, which are famous for saying things like, we've always done it that way, and get stuck on this loop of continuing to do the same things, forgetting why they were even started in the first place. I did put a live viewer question out here for anybody that might be watching out there in the ether. A live viewer question: what's one outdated process or mindset in your organization that you believe is holding back real innovation? Which kind of feeds into what Juan and I are talking about today in this discussion. So to continue on in this track, in your recent Substack article that you posted, you talk about key results as a service, okay, and how the future of software is moving toward outcome-driven AI agents, and this whole idea of agentic AI is becoming more and more popular as people are striving to learn even more about AI and can't get enough information or getting too much of it, whichever the case may be. Can you unpack that idea for our listeners, and especially those in the association world? Like, what does it mean for how we define success?
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. So that key results as a service post came in a lightning bolt to me when it was the last thing I posted. And I was just actually almost surprised how fast it came. This all came from an interview I saw with Box's CEO, Aaron Levine. Levine is, I think, is his last name. And Aaron was talking about this concept because in Box, one of the things that they're trying to do is introduce a lot of AI tooling into the platform. For anybody that doesn't know what Box is, just it's a file repository, it's Dropbox, Google Drive, right? This kind of thing. And it was really his idea that I just kind of expanded on it and linked it to our ability as organizations to think in the same way. And what he said was simple. He said, look, in the past, software as a service, SaaS, right? Its value proposition for the company putting the SaaS into the market was, how many seats can I sell, right? It was like, I'm going to give you a tool. Let's look at any of these. I mean, we're using right now, right? StreamYard. How many seats can I sell on StreamYard so that more podcasters can do what they do, right? Mm-hmm. Or let's think about even Box itself. I need to sell all the seats at a company so that everybody at that company has access to content. Okay. And that was sort of the premise. The idea was that I sell you the tool, you as human beings figure out what to do with that, how to drive outcomes from it, right? How to derive value from the tool I put in front of you. What he says is, when AI shows up and you begin to give AI models agency, so agentic AI, right? This idea of they can carry out some sort of intelligent actions on your behalf, and they have memory. There's a couple of attributes around what it means to be an agent. Suddenly, the whole point of launching something to do a thing should come at the result of something doing a thing should be an outcome, right? Not just completing tasks, but you wouldn't pay, right? This is what part of it was so funny, is like you wouldn't pay a software company to sell you a thing that is supposed to be an agent and do a thing if you couldn't demonstrate its outcome. So why are you doing that for your human beings?
Right.
Right. Right. And so he said, look, the future he thinks, right. And I think I like the take. He says, if this is true and agents are going to become the thing, then people are going to demand outcome metrics from the purchasing that they're doing out of these agents. Fine. How, as a company, will we know which agent platforms to pick if we can't define the outcomes we hope to get? Right. And so that's the lock, right? That's the inside part, is like, I, as a company and as leaders and as employees and whatever, all of us as teams, we need to understand what outcomes are. We need to understand which ones make sense for the kinds of value we're trying to deliver, so that we then people, and maybe in the tech space or other parts of the organization, go out to buy these agent tools. They're going to say, yeah, this agent tool will be able to do the outcome because the outcome aligns with the one we have internally. That's what that post is entirely about.
Well, thank you for explaining that, just because I thought it was a really interesting take. And again, this like more argument for why we really need to focus on the outcomes and really get serious about what that looks like. And I think it's really, it's really interesting to think that we don't focus more on these to make sure that we've got it right, to make sure that the questions that we're asking are right. And so I thought, maybe you might share a success story with us about a time when OKRs helped your organization or helped your team to pivot or solve some kind of complex challenge with measurable outcomes.
Yeah. Look, I think there's a success story, which is a different one. I'll tell you the more tangible one, but the first one is seeing the light or the switch go off in a person's or a team's mind, right? When they're like, oh, and actually you brought up a good example. So thinking about OKRs in podcasts, so the free unsolicited advice. Usually it's something like a podcast or a marketing campaign or something like this. When people begin to think about outcomes, what they naturally will tend to do is say, oh, here's an outcome. I'm going to send 15,000 emails. So I did. This is an outcome. It was 15,000 emails went out. Great.
Sure.
Can you put money in the bank for every one of those emails that went out? If the answer to that question is no, then there's not an outcome. It's an output. You sent 15,000 emails, right? Or in your case, let's say I want to increase. You really want to increase, let's say, viewership or whatever it might be in a podcast. But the thing that you're going to focus on is frequency of posting to LinkedIn about it, right? That's an output. The outcome is, did you actually drive a change in your viewership?
Right.
That's the outcome. The other stuff is all output stuff. So that moment when people kind of click is like, oh, okay, yeah, I've been really just tracking outputs my whole time, thinking that they were things I was really having impact with. Now, like a legitimate example for us. There's been some good ones actually in our tech team. I'll give you a couple of quick ones. One was at the end of last quarter. At the end of the Q4 of 2024. I've talked about this idea of digital wallets and verified credentials. It's a totally different topic, but as a company, one of the things that we said, okay, we need to put this technology into the hands of our practitioners, right? And one of our key results at the end of the quarter was to effectively have, and then there's a nuance here. We wanted to have 10% of our customer base that they had claimed a wallet and had at least one of our verified credentials in that wallet. Okay. On the face of it, it was a key result for us at that moment. Now, the good news is because we set the standard, we set the goal, we actually like 3x that. I think we issued something like 35,000 wallets or something like that.
Wow.
And so it was way more than we had originally anticipated. So as a team, we felt good about it, right? Now, here's the catch. As a first go, it was fine. But I would challenge the team, we've challenged ourselves around this, was that really the outcome? Right? The outcome, and I say yes to start, but not really what we were driving at. What we were driving at is if we believe that verified credentials and that technology, that fundamental technology shift there is valuable and solves a problem, the way we measure the outcome is that the doctors, the sonographers that we represent are sharing those credentials with either patients or employers or insurers. That's right. Unlocking a new kind of value that didn't exist before, that was hard to do before. We've solved some sort of meaningful problem for them. That's a thing we haven't been able to quite crack the nut at measuring. We're working with our partner Credivera on doing this, but this is the thing. So that's a success. Other simple successes, shorter story. This will be for my tech friends. We all have to deal with support tickets, right? And actually this will be it's a question you didn't ask, but it's an important point. The difference between a KPI and an OKR.
I'm so glad you're answering that, because I actually did think about that before. Yes.
Yeah. So this one gets confused a little bit, at least. And so we've come up with a way to really, I think, make it simple to understand. A KPI is a health metric. It goes red or it goes green, right? Mm-hmm. It's either in a good standing or a good space, or it's in a bad space, up or down. It doesn't really matter. An OKR is a metric you use to measure change, right? Mm-hmm. KPIs measure your health. OKRs measure change. All right. Now, an OKR can become a KPI when its stability is stable. It's not changing, and it's not measuring change anymore. It's gotten to a steady state. So the example with the support side of things is we got all these tickets for support. And first thing was, let's find out things that measure success here. So we came up with two very common ones: is what's our time to resolution and what's our time to first response, right? So we are committing to the company that we will answer at least first touch within 1 hour of any ticket that comes in, right? Mm-hmm. And we will promise, we aim to promise to resolve your issue within some other period of time. And it kind of depends on severity. First, we didn't have the numbers, so we started tracking the numbers. Then we said, oh, those aren't good. We can do better than that. That's a key result. Let's reduce that. How are we going to reduce that? That's a problem to solve. That's the team's problem to solve, not mine. I'm not going to tell them how to do it. They had to figure out how they were going to get there, right? So then we tracked that every week. And we could see the numbers kind of started to come down. We had some impact, right? Finally, it got to a place where like, okay, this is so stable now that we've gotten to a place where could we optimize more? Probably. The law of diminishing returns starts to show up. Why would you? For the effort. So now we turn that into a KPI, which we also just look at really quickly every week and say, how are we doing? 0, 0. Okay, we're good. We haven't breached our KPI threshold. Let's move on. That's another success story.
And I it's weird quoting you to you, but you say outcome fluency, the ability to define and align around outcomes, is going to be the make or break skill for organizations in this new era, right? Yeah. So what does building that outcome muscle look like for associations? What does it look like when they're starting to embrace this and maybe, they're not as savvy around OKRs getting started in this line of thought?
Yeah. Look, I think this is true regardless of what domain we're talking about. But fundamentally, you've got to become, if you aren't, and be really honest about it, are you a learning organization? Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't, look, I don't mean that you pay for tuition reimbursement.
Right.
That is not a learning organization, right? That's a benefit package. It's not a learning organization. So what I mean is, how often are teams sharing videos, blog posts, podcasts, courses they're taking? Are you as a company paying for learning platforms for everybody or teams or whatever makes sense for you? Are you cultivating active learning through not only engaging with the material, but then discussion about the material together in some way, right? So this is going to be true. Look, AI, all the things right now, this is what it's going to take, is a lot of learning. And at the executive level, or you like something we do, we tend to pick a book and we all sort of read it together at some level, and it becomes part of our conversation. You got to be careful again, not to turn it into, the CEO and the executive team's fever dreams. And now nobody understands what you're talking about. Right. So that's a thing. That's definitely a thing. Okay. So that's sort of step one. So if you walk through that door and you want to think about outcomes, there are a ton of resources out there for you to learn about this stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. So first thing, you just got to put, like I think one of our metaphors early on was you got to put the time in at the gym. I'm not a gym guy, but okay, fine. I got guitars behind me. I used to practice 9-12 hours, right? Like, I mean, this was back when I still thought I was going to be a musician. So you got to put the time in. And then you begin to simply say, it's really simply, it's just, okay, in this, we understand it. This is a quarterly thing. We kind of frame it around this. Okay, just start. Find one problem that you want to change. You want to change something about your business, and apply the technique, right? Mm-hmm. It really is that. Now, another piece of advice I would give is, if you think it's got some potential for you as a company, or even as a division or a team level, there are some really good coaches out there that specialize in OKRs, right? I mentioned John went and talked to the guys at Google, right? Like they didn't know what to do with this. So this guy had kind of figured it out and he was out there coaching. We use a coach. There's plenty of people out there in the world that will coach on this. So I would encourage you, if you think that this is a thing that you want to give a shot, pay a couple bucks to a coach early, so that they get you sort of on the right track. And I think that partnership is super important. That's really all it takes.
I really love that. So I wanted to go into talking about a little bit about organizational design. and looking at organizational design and how it is often overlooked. What do you think needs to evolve in that area for associations to, I'd say, stay relevant over the next 5 to 10 years, with the caveat that in the back of my brain, I always hear Jeff DeCania saying, we don't want to be relevant. We want to thrive, right? Like we should be wanting to be more than relevant. But okay, let's just go there.
Yeah. And I think Jeff's point is well taken, right? Relevancy is a thing you have to have, right? Now, I'm not sure exactly how he framed it when he said it, but relevancy in the status quo makes sense if that's all that's being demanded of you from your environment, from your customer base, or what have you, right? If it is not, then relevancy can be defined by the way you change shape, right? Mm-hmm. And shape being what products are you putting into the market? What are the skills that you've got on board at your company? And then how do you maybe even this is for me, the last thing is, what are the labels you give to teams and or titles? Mm-hmm. That's doesn't really matter, right? Eventually it'll matter, and it matters a lot to HR teams. I understand why, because they have to create some sense of who are you, what do you do, and how much do we pay you? I get it. Yeah. Right. And so coming up with just a weird name isn't gonna solve that problem. But I think that we talk a lot about digital transformation and transformation in general. And I've kind of aped Marty Kagan's sort of definition of transformation, which I just love how clean it is it's being able to do something tomorrow that you can't do today.
No, right. Yeah.
And I tease the teams, right? I'm like, we want to be a beautiful butterfly. Like, I'm just a caterpillar. I need beautiful wings, right? So it's a manifestation of change, physically manifesting change in a creature, right? Mm-hmm. And so what would that be? First of all, ask yourself the question, why does the caterpillar turn into a butterfly, right? So that's your trigger for change, right? So identify that in my head. And I know, again, it's goofy how to think about this stuff, but these kind of simple models, heuristics work, right? They just kind of just simplify the thing. So what is the trigger for change? Have you identified that? Okay. Then that should start informing you about what is the next shape you need to take, right? Like, what is the butterfly version of you tomorrow?
Right.
And what is the attribute the butterfly got? Well, the butterfly got the ability to fly. I mean, that's a simple thing, the fly, right? Okay. What do we need to do to fly? Okay, that's how you start kind of getting. Now, what I think ends up happening is you intellectualize that change, but you forget that the organization inside, in terms of how people relate and how, what I call the sticks and bricks diagram, the org chart, how that manifests in people's minds as to who do I report to, where are the centers of power, where are the centers of influence and decision making, all of this stuff, they're all signals. Right. Mm. And if you don't also actively think about how am I going to change the way I signal to the people at this company, how we work together and how influence and how power works here and how decision making works here, you're going to end up with the same sort of result as you were when you started. Right. Now, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to propose, and everybody's different and you can take it by case, but if you believe you transformed and you guys are still structured exactly the same way as you were, I'd press a little harder on the concept of whether or not you really transformed or not.
Interesting. Okay. I like it. There are no easy outs with you. It's like, it's going to be real 100%. You're going to be pushing for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, KiKi, I think a quick thing here for the association space specifically, I've written a little bit about this, but I've mentioned it before, but it keeps nagging me. And the nagging is, if you're going to be a different kind of company as an association, isn't the first thing you need to challenge the concept of membership entirely? Right. And this ties to product, right? Like, so right. My thing, I can't quite land on it, but it's like, just membership isn't a product, right? Mm-hmm. But now think about that in org charts terms, right? Tomorrow we do away with a membership organization team. They're gone. And I'm being extra.
You do. I mean, I can actually sense a vibration and force right now as like all these membership people are like, oh, yeah,
no, right. No. But that's the kind, I think you don't have to do that. But what I'm saying is you got to put that on the table as clay. Let's play with that idea. And maybe what we come out with is some new version or a slightly varied version of what membership is and what it means and how it manifests at this company. Maybe one of those answers is, you know what? What are we doing? That's just a subscription management. What we actually sell is all this other stuff.
I love that idea just because in the event space, I've watched event professionals who are really event designers get super innovative about the way that they think about activations and engagement and what's the purpose of this getting people together. And there's some really clever people who have they've put it all on the table to play with and say, what's the whole point? If we're just going to get together and convene a bunch of people, get some coffee urns and stuff like that, what are we really ultimately trying to do? And when they get super honest about that, super creative things come as a result. Or I've also seen it become extremely pared down, where it's maybe the innovation is in the fact that it's very simplified and super focused and beautiful, right? An elegant result as a result of that type of thing.
And you just
membership would be amazing,
right? And you just actually landed in the way you said it. If you think about it, you got into the idea pretty quickly about what would be the outcomes of us doing this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it forces that conversation stronger, right? What are the results? What are the outcomes of us thinking about it this other way? I also love the idea of simplicity, because you're right. I mean, I don't know whose it is, but it's a saying, I think, out there that perfection is when there's nothing left to take away. Right.
I like that.
Yeah. And so what can you say? Sometimes we get caught in this cycle of like more, and I've heard it in membership for years, right? It's like, how many more benefits can we bundle? Because more is better. It's like, well, but they call it in SaaS, they call this product enablement. You got 15 features, right? Product or benefits, we call that in membership, right? How many of those features are actually being used by your customer base?
Yeah.
And how many of those are really increasing? I'll get into a little bit of strategy chat here, but how many of those are really increasing your customers' willingness to pay?
Right. Oh, it's such a good question. I really do think that ultimately that should be I should just take a day and that be the question and just sit there and that be it. That's the one question all day long.
Yeah.
Done. Just spend the whole day with that. Yeah. I love that. I can't believe how fast time is going, but I do have some rapid fire questions. One book every emerging leader must read.
I love this question. All right. I'm going to answer it. I'm also going to say I have just recently changed my mind, and I reserve the right to change my mind again, probably in a week from now when I read the next book.
Okay, this is good.
So right now there's a book called Thinking in Systems. And it is not very long. It originally came out, I think, back in 1994, written by a thinking systems professor in the UK. And she, I think actually the book was finished. She passed away before it was finished. And I think some of her teammates finished it, for her. I think that was the story. Anyway, small book, but I think as a leader, the ability to understand how systems work. And I'm not talking about like computer systems, right? Like literally look outside your window and try to imagine the relationships between all the things that make the trees and the grass and the animals and all these things. Everything is a system, right? It's an integrated system. We are reflections of all of that. We're in fact not reflections. We are that too, right? As people, as communities, as companies.
Yeah.
Your ability as a leader to understand the abstracted versions of those concepts, I think, is super powerful to help you understand where strategy should be, what levers you should move, where information is flowing, where is value being created, all of the other kind of funny buzzwords we love. I think it all begins with understanding the at least the basic structures of systems.